Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this wonderful Thursday afternoon, and I'm very excited for today. Not just because it's football day. Actually, you know what? Yeah, that's the only reason why I'm excited for today, because today is football, and I like watching football. But if you guys are interested in hearing about football and, what's going on in the football world, we do have several football podcasts on our channel that I recommend you guys go listen to. We have a sports podcast channel that's actually going to go live after I'm done going live. If you guys are very interested in any of the football topics, TJ is going to be talking about all of that today. And now for the topics that I'm going to discuss, first of all, no, I'm not going to be talking about recent incidents that may or may not have happened on IG Live that may or may not have been caused by Shannon Sharpe, allegedly. Not going to be talking about that in this first segment because, let's face it, how can I talk basketball about that? But I'm sure if any of you guys are, in tune in the sports world, you know exactly what that is, but I'm not going to be talking about that Shannon Sharpe incident here. So, in this first segment, we're going to be continuing on with the questions for each division. We're moving on to, I believe this is the last one, we're going on to the Central Division. And because I don't remember giving my biggest questions for those teams, and so we're just going to be doing that in the first segment. Then in the second segment, I'm going to be talking about Aja Wilson. She just recently set a WNBA record for most points scored in a single season, and we're just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about that in the second segment. Then in the third segment, DeMar DeRozan had a couple of bold comments and bold claims that I would like to talk about and I would like to cover and give my opinions on. And so that's going to be the third segment. And then in the fourth segment, I'm going to continue ranking each and every team based off of their young core. And I'm going to follow that into the fifth segment and try and conclude the list. Again, try and conclude. I don't really expect to conclude the list because, there's 30 teams and I don't expect to have time to be able to do all of that. But we'll see. So those are going to be your segments. And before I begin with the first, I do like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, or something that you've just been dying to share. We are all ears. And this show is all about keeping the conversation lively. If you really want to make sure that your comment or question gets noticed, go ahead and use Super Chat. You can hit the $sign below the chat box, send in your message. It's guaranteed to get featured on the show. It's a great way to support the channel as well. And if Super Chat's not really your thing, then you can always use the link displayed below the ticker or the link in the description, gsmcpodcast.net, and you can send in your tips or donations and comments that way. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and go into the first segment, which is going to be talking about every single Central Division team and their biggest questions going into this season. So, where to start? I wonder what team we should start. I mean, there's a lot of teams there's a couple of teams in the Central Division. Now, a lot of the teams in the Central Division aren't really that, how should I say, they're kind of mid, I guess you could say. Some of them are mid. It's it's one of those conferences where it's like you have the top and then you have the bottom of the bottom. And you'll see what I'm talking about. You'll see what I'm talking about when I go into this. So, first team I think I'm going to talk about is Chicago. And really, this team is a team that's going to be riddled with so many questions. What are they going to do with Zach LaVine? How are they going to be without DeMar DeRozan? Is Kobe White finally going to take that next step? There's so many questions for this team. But I think the biggest question for this team is, what will Lonzo Ball's return look like? Now, Lonzo, since leaving the Lakers, Lonzo Ball has arguably been one of the more underrated guards in the league and one of the more underrated role-playing guards. Now, I know that as a number 2 overall draft pick, he wasn't meant to be just a role-playing guard. However, his play greatly impacts the Chicago Bulls or any team that he's played with especially when he was on the Pelicans. His strengths are playmaking and defense. And then while he was on New Orleans, he ended up developing a jump shot. Now on Chicago, he's perfected that jump shot. So now not only is he like a legitimately competent shooter, not only is he a legitimate playmaker, a legitimate defender, and a decent scorer, he's also a much better shooter now, which was one thing that he struggled with when he was on Los Angeles. And a lot of people, they give a lot of praise to Lonzo for figuring out a jump shot because he put in the work and he tried to put in the jump shot, which is the only proof that you need. Lonzo Ball is living proof that Ben Simmons can develop a jump shot, but Ben Simmons just chooses not to. Like, living proof. But I digress. So, again, Lonzo Ball, he hasn't really played since January 2022, and the Bulls recently lost Alex Caruso to the Oklahoma City Thunder, so now they really need a competent 3-and-D guard to be able to pair alongside with Kobe White. And after setbacks and 3 knee surgeries, Lonzo might finally be able to make it back onto the court and play on the court because he is, like, again, he's solid. He's not like the player that everyone thought he was going to be back on UCLA, but he's solid. And he averaged 13 points, 5.4 rebounds, 5.1 assists in the 2021 and 2022 season. And I have a feeling it's also going to be a little bit curious how this is going to look when he's paired up alongside Josh Giddey, who is another playmaker. I'm not a big fan of him for obvious reasons, and really pairing Lonzo up with somebody like him, I'm not entirely sure how that's going to mesh well with your lineup and your offense. But that's why we have to see what Lonzo's return is going to look like, because maybe they'll mesh well, maybe they won't mesh well. Who knows? All right, so let's move on to the next team, the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, the Cavs, the way I see it, I think my biggest question for the Cavs is, when is Donovan Mitchell leaving? Like, how long can you keep Donovan Mitchell happy to be in Cleveland? Because as much as people like making money, people also like winning. And if Donovan Mitchell isn't winning, maybe he's not going to want to partake in Cleveland anymore. And that might sour a lot of Cleveland fans. So we'll be entering year 3 with Donovan Mitchell in Cleveland. And he's going to be making $150 million in the next 3 years with a contract extension. And so he is committed with the Cavs, but it's how long will he stay committed and how long will he be able to be happy while being on the Cavs roster. And there's a hierarchy in the East right now. So it's going to be the Celtics, the Knicks, and the Sixers occupying the groups of like a real contending teams. Those 3 teams are real contending teams. More so the Knicks than the Sixers, and more so the Celtics than the Sixers, because I'm sorry, I understand Paul George, he's a very fantastic player, but I just don't have any faith in Philly. And Cleveland, they fall into like not the same tier as the Knicks and like Celtics and Sixers, but a tier directly below that, where they could make it far, but nobody really legitimately thinks they're going to. And that's sort of like the category where they fall under in this instance. And not to mention, Mobley averaged 16 points, 9 rebounds, and 2 assists, along with 2.2 blocks. So maybe this year they'll be even better, and he'll progress. But since we are going a little bit low on time, I am going to speed this up just a little bit. So the next team is the Detroit Pistons, one of the worst teams in the NBA last season. And if the Wizards didn't exist, I would call this team the worst team in the NBA. And the biggest question for the Pistons is, which of the young players is going to make the next step? Because we've seen Cade Cunningham make that step. Now we need to see if there's going to be another player make that step and start playing very consistently. And one could argue that Cade hasn't made that step yet, so maybe Cade is going to be the one to make that step because he is putting up production just in garbage time. So maybe it's his time, like this is his time to, I just dropped my wallet, maybe this is his time to become like the next person up and actually lead the team to wins. Or maybe somebody else is going to step up alongside with him and help Detroit gain wins. But as of right now, Cade Cunningham, he was coming off a career season. Tobias Harris is going back to Detroit. And Detroit has like a lot of young players on the roster. So it's totally possible that either one of those players could just end up sprouting as one of the better players on the team. And now Jalen Duren is a very popular pick. I think he could be one of those players that steps up. He averaged 13, 11, and 2 in last season. And there's also a Sir Thompson who they have on the team. Now, I believe he was out for most of the season. Again, I believe, I'm not entirely sure. But I do know, like, he did show glimpse of being an all-defensive caliber player. And it might not have been it might have been his brother. But I know it was one of the Thompsons that was out for a while. Next team is the Indiana Pacers. And the biggest question that I have for the Pacers, and I think the biggest question that everyone has, is how will the Pacers look against healthy Eastern Conference teams? Because the only teams that they played in the postseason were teams that were injured. And even the Boston Celtics, they were injured when they went up against the Indiana Pacers. And, I mean, still were able to sweep them. But aside from that, the Pacers, they really got as far as they got because of injuries. I mean, they didn't have to worry about Giannis. They didn't have to worry about Dame, even though they lost 2 games in the series. They did not have to worry about Julius Randle against the Knicks. And they didn't have to worry about several other young, talented players on the Knicks roster that ended up getting injured going into Game 7. So, the big question, again, is going to be how are the Pacers going to play against a healthy Eastern Conference? And finally, the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, the biggest question for Milwaukee is going to be, can they stay healthy? And really, because the biggest problem the biggest issue that they had towards the end was just not being healthy in the postseason. And if they can amend that problem, then I have a feeling that they're going to be one of the contending teams alongside with Philly, New York, and the Celtics. Now, unfortunately, that's what I would say if Doc Rivers wasn't their coach. But Doc Rivers is their coach, so I have a feeling that they're going to lose in the second round anyway. But if they didn't have Doc Rivers as their coach, I really think that this team would be in the contending spots the same way as Philly, New York, and Boston are in contending spots right now. They would be those would be the 4 teams that we see in the Eastern Conference semifinals, and those would be the 4 teams that are going to be competing for an Eastern Conference finals. And if Doc Rivers wasn't the coach, I would definitely put them in that category, but I can't do that because Doc Rivers is their coach, and I do not trust Doc Rivers. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of this questions. Let me know if you guys have different questions about all of these teams. But aside from that, we are going to go into a short break, and I'll be back to you with the second segment where I talk about A'ja Wilson breaking the WNBA record for most points in a season. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, I'm going to be talking about A'ja Wilson breaking a WNBA record. And before I begin, I'm going to go ahead and remind all of you that we love what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take, whether you guys have a burning question, or something that you've just been dying to share. We are all ears. And if you really want your comment or question to get noticed, you can go ahead and use Super Chat. Just click the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment if Super Chat isn't really your thing. And your comment or question will guaranteed get featured on the show if you use either or. So don't be afraid to use Super Chat. Don't be afraid to use the link. And with that out of the way, we can go right ahead and talk about A'ja Wilson setting her WNBA record. And she's the best player in the WNBA right now, most likely going to end up winning the MVP in the WNBA right now, assuming Caitlyn doesn't just come out of nowhere and just steal it from A'ja, which would be very surprising because A'ja's had a phenomenal season. She's been doing things alongside with Caitlin Clark. She's been doing things that the WNBA has not yet seen. And one of those things is scoring as many points as she's done. She broke the WNBA single season scoring record just before the first half of the Las Vegas Aces game against the Fever on Wednesday night. So she broke a record in Caitlin Clark's, or in front of Caitlin Clark. Wilson hit a jumper from the free throw line within 26.4 seconds left in the second quarter to surpass the previous mark of 939 points set by Jewel Lloyd in 2023. The Aces' two-time league MVP came into the game averaging 27 points along with 11 rebounds. And those numbers are just ridiculous. 27 and 11. Those are fantastic numbers. And if she doesn't win the MVP averaging those numbers, that's going to be crazy. However, there are a lot of people and there's a lot of growing debate that Caitlyn should end up winning the MVP because now not only is Caitlyn leading the WNBA in three-point makes, she's also most likely going to break the WNBA record for most assists in a single season as a rookie. So Caitlyn's going to win the MVP not MVP. She's going to win the Rookie of the Year award unanimously. If she's going to win MVP, that's a completely different story because another thing that should be taken into account is the playoffs because Caitlyn, since joining the team, has brought the team to the playoffs for the first time in a while. So there's still debates, but I do think that A'ja is going to win it, not only because of the fact that her numbers seem a little bit nicer, but the fact that she's also just been doing this for longer, and I don't think people and voters are going to be that quick to give Caitlin Clark the MVP. It would be very surprising, and it would definitely ruffle a lot of women's feathers, and all of the WNBA athletes will be so jealous and so mad at her. It could cause either problems with the WNBA, they might gain even more disdain because the WNBA, I'm sorry, but a lot of their players are hurting themselves with their positions on Caitlyn and where they stand on Caitlyn. Because a lot of people now, they don't like Diana because of what Diana's been saying about Caitlyn and how she, in the beginning of, before Caitlyn was even drafted, Diana was already throwing shade at her saying, it's a whole different league, you gotta be ready, all that stuff, right? Meanwhile, and now we see Caitlyn just absolutely beating her in head-to-head competitions. And her reputation has sort of taken a hit, despite the fact that she's been winning. She won the gold medal, for crying out loud, and people still don't like her. So a lot of these WNBA players, they really ruin their reputation, and you really don't want your reputation to be ruined. But just off of something as dumb as that, or as mindless as that, I should say. Pardon me for my poor sense of words, but as something as unnecessary or as mindless as that, and. But I do have a feeling that, let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you think A'ja is going to win the MVP, or do you think Caitlyn is going to win the MVP? And if Caitlyn wins, how much of an uproar do you think that's going to cause with the entire franchise, and or with the fan base and with the rest of the WNBA players? So A'ja, she finished the game with 27 points, 12 rebounds as Las Vegas ended up winning 86-75. And Wilson credited her teammates for helping her break the record. She's saying, I don't want to sound cliche when I say this, but I don't get any of that without every single teammate along the way. I'm so grateful to be able to play with selfless women. She said, my teammates are the heartbeat. They keep me going. I don't get any points without them passing me the ball. Or passing me the basketball, excuse me. So the points are great. They're always going to be there. I'm never going to stop shooting. But the group that we have in this locker room has something that I'm truly so happy to be around. Wilson needed just 35 games to break the WNBA record, who was previously set by Lloyd, who did it in 38 games. So Wilson's previous high was 912 points, set in 40 games last season. And she now has 956 points this season and could potentially be the first player in the league history to reach 1,000 points in a year, which will be very, very impressive. And she missed the team's previous game in New York as well on Sunday as she was recovering from an ankle injury she suffered against Connecticut last Friday. And the Aces, they have 4 games left, including another one against the Fever on Friday night. So we could really, this record, while it's already broken, it's still not set. So we could see the points total increase dramatically, and there is a watch to see on whether or not she's going to end up surpassing the 1,000 point marker, because let's see. Let's do some math here. So there are 4 games left, and there is 956 points on the board that she has right now. So 956 minus 1,000 is going to be minus 44. So that's going to be 44 points that she'd have to score. So in the span of 4 games, she'll have to score 44 points, meaning that in each game she has to score at least 11 points, and then she gets 1,000 points. And so you tell me, do you guys think that A'ja is going to be the first WNBA player to reach 1,000 points? Or do you think that's not happening? What do you guys have? You guys have the over? You guys have the under? Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And obviously, if injuries aren't going to happen, I'm taking the over. Easily. I am taking the over. But if she does get injured, then yeah, it's not going to look good. But I'm strongly taking the over on this one. I think she's going to end the season with over 1,000 points. Now, another thing that should also be taken into account when thinking about this is I'm not entirely sure if A'ja is going to sit out before the playoffs, because you know how some NBA players they like to go into the game, their very last game. Let's say their playoff spot has already been set. If they're going to be playing in a meaningless game, sometimes they might just check in for the game for a few seconds and then sit out the rest of the game. That's how it works in the NBA. Not to mention, that's also how it works sometimes in the NFL when teams have already established their playoff spot. They decide to bench most of the starting lineup, and they decide to let some other players go ahead and go in there and play, as opposed to your main players, so that way the main players are healthy enough for the postseason. So I don't know if A'ja or the Aces are going to do that same concept, but my point still stands, 44 points. I mean, she could easily get 44 points in one game. So not really that big of a deal in my opinion. I'm going for the over. So let me know in the comments if you think she's going to get over 1,000 or if you guys think she's going to get below 1,000 points in this season. But aside from that, we are out of time for second segment, So now I'm going to go ahead and go into the third segment where I talk a little bit about DeMar DeRozan and some of his bold takes that he's had recently that I've been hearing and I've been watching. I've been looking at quotes that he said, and I'm really questioning him. And I just wanted to go ahead and talk a little bit about that in this segment. So I'll be right back after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be talking about DeMar DeRozan and some of his bold comments that he's been talking about recently. I mean, he had a bold take about the Kings, and he also had a huge take about his former Raptors team in 2019 that I really want to touch on in this segment. And I kind of want to get your opinions on this as well, if you guys don't mind. But you can just leave your opinions in the comments as well. Obviously, I know he's not on the Bulls anymore, but I don't have a picture of him in a Kings jersey, so boo-hoo for all of you guys that are technical and just be like, oh, DeMar's not on the Bulls anymore. Anyways, DeMar recently, I think over the offseason, I think he's trying to be a little bit of a comedian. I don't know what, but he's been saying a lot of random things and a lot of things that just that sound like a joke, but I think he's being serious. And the article, we're going to start with this take first. So the article starts by saying DeMar makes a bold prediction for the Kings in the 2025 playoffs. So DeMar has great hopes for his next squad. During his Wednesday interview on ESPN's First Take, the Kings playmaker was asked what his boldest NBA predictions for the next season was, and he stated that his team would make it to the Western Conference Finals, which is ridiculous. The quote says, the quote from DeRozan says, being able to play with a guy like De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis with the year that they had before, even last year before injuries, they were a top team in the conference. I felt like I could be that piece to take them over the top. And while I do think that, yes, they do have a really, really good chance of making it all the way to the Western Conference Finals, I would have thought that they had a better chance had DeRozan not put a target on their back the way that he just did right now. Because him saying that they are going to make the Western Conference Finals is just him putting a huge X on his back, and every team is going to try to make sure that he doesn't make it to the Western Conference Finals. And that's going to make your road to the finals and the Western Conference Finals all that more difficult. The more attention that you bring onto yourself and the more attention that you bring to your team just by talking, if that makes sense to all of you guys. And on top of that, the Western Conference Finals. DeRozan has only made the conference finals, I can count, one time. And that was in the Eastern Conference when it was so weak, so much weaker than the Western Conference right now. DeRozan couldn't even make the Eastern Conference Finals when there were only two real teams competing in that spot. And he expects to make it in the West when you can argue 6 teams belong in the Western Conference Finals? I don't think so. That is egregious. And I like the confidence, but I think there's a difference between confidence, cockiness, and arrogance. And right now, I believe that DeRozan was being a little bit arrogant for not only drawing attention to himself the way that he's doing, but also having such high hopes for season 1. I mean, 9 times out of 10, the high hopes don't end up being as high as you expect them to. And the highs of your teams might not be as high as you expect them to. And given how DeMar has only been in the conference finals once and has choked his way through the playoffs in every single year, is ridiculous. in my opinion. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And the Western Conference, it continues to improve. And yes, while DeRozan does bring improvement to the roster, saying this, I would have, if the Kings would have just not said anything, if there were no players on the Kings that have said anything, if DeRozan just played ball and they just played during the season, I would believe, this team has what it takes to make it to the Western Conference Finals. But it's literally just now that he said it, I don't have faith in them now. I don't have faith in him now that he said it, because it goes I'm sorry, he's just not that guy. He is not the clutch guy that he thinks he is and that he wants to be. I am sorry. And it's what's crazy enough is how yes, I do understand the Chicago Bulls, they might not have had the best roster, but he was supposed to be the number 1 and the number 2 option on that roster, but he was unable to lead the Chicago Bulls into the postseason numerous times. So what makes you think he's going to be able to just with this new team make it to the Western Conference Finals? I don't agree with that in the slightest. And he goes on and says some other crazier things about not just about the Kings, but about his former Raptors team. Let me just go ahead and bring up the comment that he said. So DeMar said on according to First Take, I have no doubt in my mind that same outcome would have happened. This is DeMar on if the Raptors would have won a championship if they hadn't traded him for Kawhi Leonard back in 2019. And I'm sorry, DeMar DeRozan, he is loved by Raptors fans. Not even Raptors fans agree with this take. Everybody knows that Kawhi was the only reason and the biggest reason why Toronto was able to win a championship. I'm sorry to say this, and I'm sorry, I know it sounds like I'm slandering, but that's just the truth. Kawhi Leonard in 2019 had one of the best postseason runs in the history of the NBA. DeMar DeRozan would have had to put on that kind of performance in the postseason in order for the Raptors to even do what they did and win. DeRozan has never done that in the postseason before, and he most likely would never have done that in the postseason anymore. He is not a postseason player the same way that Kawhi is a postseason player. And quite frankly, if DeMar was playing on that Raptors team, I think they would have lost against Philly. I genuinely feel like they would have lost against Philly, against that Jimmy Butler, Ben Simmons, and Joel Embiid lineup. And on top of that, they would also have to play against Giannis. We saw the Raptors struggle against a LeBron. Yes, he is a peak LeBron, but he is still a much older LeBron. Imagine how much they would have suffered going up against Giannis Antetokounmpo. I don't even know. I think that would have been murder on the court. Honestly, there was no way that the Raptors would have been able to beat with DeMar. There's no way that the Raptors would have been able to beat either the Bucks that year or the 76ers that year. And what makes me say this confidently? In the year that the Raptors, they were the number 1 seed the year before that when they had DeMar and Kyle Lowry in 2018, and they were the number 1 seed. Now, a lot of people didn't realize that the reason why they were the number 1 seed was because they had a much easier schedule ending the season than the Boston Celtics had ending the season, and that was the reason why they were able to take the 1 seed. And so they take the 1 seed, and they play against the Wizards. And it took them 6 games to beat the Wizards. And the Wizards that year had 3 less wins than the Nuggets, who didn't even make the postseason in the Western Conference. And then they proceeded to get swept by LeBron. Not the Cavs, LeBron. So, no. DeMar would not win a championship with those Raptors team. He is just speaking he's just speaking confidence. He's dreaming at this point. I'm sorry to say this, and I know it sounds like I'm being rather mean and cruel, but he's just dreaming, plain and simple. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you guys think that DeMar actually had a legitimate shot in winning with the Raptors? And do you think that DeMar would have actually won with the Raptors had they not have traded for Kawhi Leonard? And let's see, what else? Let me know in the comments if you guys think that where the Kings are going to end up. Do you think the Kings are going to be first-round exit? You think they're going to be second-round exit? Do you think they're going to make it to the Western Conference Finals? Or do you think they're finals-bound? Let me know in the comments what you guys think. But with that being said, we are out of time for this third segment. So now we will go ahead and go into the fourth segment where I will be continuing to rank each team based off of their young core. So I will be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC. To access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are, whoa, the glare on that. Hold on just 1 second. There we go. Okay. And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I apologize for that glare. It's really annoying. I'm going to try to move my desk to a different spot in the room for next time. So you guys might see a different background and you guys won't have to worry about looking at that. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to continue on with my rankings of each of these teams based off of their young talent. And we left off, I believe we left off at number 15, which was the Atlanta Hawks. And so now we're going on to some of the worst teams that have based off of their young core. But actually, you know what? No. Not the worst teams, more like the mid-tier teams, because right now we're going to be doing 16, 17, 18, so on and so forth, however much farther we can go along with the list. But let's continue on. So let's start with number 16. So Utah is a team that's probably around that mid-tier. I have no idea exactly where I don't know if these guys are good. I don't know if these guys are bad. I don't know if these guys are going to be good. I don't know if these guys are going to be bad. I don't know if there's so many questions around this this young team, and I have no idea which direction Utah is going to want to go in when we're looking at all of these young players. But just based off of their abilities as individuals, I think 16 is probably, maybe a decent spot for them. This is a list inspired by an Instagram user, NBA District. So I think that 16 is actually a pretty solid spot. But I mean, it gets a boost in its rankings simply because there's so many young players on the Utah Jazz. So, I mean, they have Keontae George, they have Walker Kessler, they have Cody Williams, Colin Sexton, Taylor Hendricks, Johnny Juzang, Bruce Sanzaba, forgive me if I completely messed up that last name. They have a lot of young and talented athletes on the team, for sure. However, whichever one they stick with is rather unclear, and whichever one they're going to pick to build their roster with is still rather unclear, because I mean, they just recently signed Lauri Markkanen, and maybe these young guys are just going to try and fit in and be role players, but they're so young that they could evolve into something much greater than just role players. You don't have to just settle them for mediocrity. So I have no idea what kind of direction they're going to try and go with this young core, but I'm very excited to see what they do. And next team on the list of the young core is the Cavs. They don't really have they don't have a really, really young team like players that are age 25 or below, because that's what's considered young in this in today's NBA. Like 26, 27 is where you usually enter your prime, and like 25, anything before 25 is usually like when you're still learning the ropes and you're still young in the league. And for the Cavs, the players that they have that are relatively young are Garland, he's 24 years old, Jalen Tyson, Craig Porter, and Evan Mobley. Now, the Cavs are one of the teams that barely did anything in the offseason aside from extending Donovan Mitchell, so yay for that. But with their young core, excuse me, with the roster that they have and like the young lineup that they have, I think being in the mid-tier is okay, because Evan Mobley he could develop into your number one option. And I think just the fact that they have Evan Mobley there and he's rather young, I think that's good enough for this team to give them their ranking at 17. That's just me, though. And next team on this list is New Orleans. Now, I mean, this one was a little bit tricky because I wanted to put them a little bit higher because I do think that these young players are incredibly talented. However, because of the fact that they constantly keep getting injured and they're injury prone, primarily Zion Williamson, I can't really agree with this being higher than in the mid tier. So it's like anything higher than like 16 or 15, I can't really agree with, because some of the young players, like for example, Zion Williamson, he's age 24, but he spent most of his career sitting out due to injuries. And well, he spent a lot of his career, I shouldn't say most because I'm not entirely sure if it's most, but he spent a lot of his career just worrying about injuries and things like that. So Trey Murphy, Jordan Hawkins, Yves Missy, and Antonio Reeves, and Carlo Matkovic, again, those are all of the young players on the team. So they do have the only real big name there is Zion Williamson, and they do have a solid, backups for replacements to see, maybe they'll develop into the future and things like that. But again, there aren't really that many huge, big names that you think of when you're thinking of the Pelicans. And because Zion constantly gets injured, I have to keep them in, the mid-tier of that. So, next team on this list is the Philadelphia 76ers. And the 76ers, they don't really have they're a very balanced team, I will say. Like this right now, this is one of their most balanced stages in the, I guess you could say, they're in their era, their trust the process era, where it's like they aren't entirely, yes, they do have young players, but now they have Paul George and this veteran player. And speaking of the young talent that they have, Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, Ricky Council, Adam Bonnet, and KJ Martin. They do have all of those players on the roster, and Maxey is a huge reason why this team is ranked the way that they in the spot that they're ranked. However, the rest of the players, they aren't really impressive. They aren't wow players that you would want to have on your roster. They're just there, and obviously, we have no idea whether or not they could develop into more, but as of right now, Maxey being probably either the second or the third option. I don't know where you would put him as. Is Maxey a second option, or is Maxey a third option? What option is he? Because I am 90% sure that Joel Embiid is going to be the first option. And I don't know if some people actually consider Maxey the first option, considering how Joel Embiid doesn't show up in the postseason. But aside from that, I mean, seriously, is he a second option or is he a third option? Let me know in the comments what you guys think. And for the last part of this list, we're going to end it with, okay, wait a minute, what the heck was that? Okay, there we go. We're going to end it with Ben Simmons. I have no idea what just happened. Something just happened on my computer. We're going to end it with the Brooklyn Nets and Ben Simmons. This man right here, he needs to be off the team right now. I am going to preach it to the mountaintops till the end of time. Get him off the team. But aside from him, the Nets, they recently traded Mikal Bridges. So aside from the young players that they already have on the roster, and there's a lot of them, they're going to have younger players coming in because of draft capital. And maybe if the team is if they draft properly, like maybe the young core of players is going to be a very, very serious team. So let's go over the young talents. So Cam Thomas, the best player, is 23 years old. Nick Claxton, 25 years old. Noah Clowney, 20. Darek Whitehead, 20. De'Aaron Sharp, 22. Jalen Wilson, 23. Keon Johnson, 22. Trendon Watford, 23. Zaire Williams, 23. And Killian Hayes, 23. There are so many young players on this roster, and I mean, it's crazy how now Ben Simmons isn't a part of that, yet all of these players that I just mentioned earlier are better than him 9 times out of 10. Actually, no, 10 times out of 10. And it's really just, it's honestly sad how the downfall of Ben Simmons has come. But aside from Ben Simmons, I keep rambling about him because I just can't stand him. I don't want him on my team. But the rest of the players, like Cam Thomas and Nick Claxton, yes, give me more of that. We like those guys. And the rest of the squad is still sort of like meh. And Cam Thomas, even so, it's like he doesn't really seem to mesh well with Nick Claxton. Claxton doesn't seem to like how Cam Thomas doesn't pass. There was a clip where Claxton was like open directly under the basket, but Cam Thompson decided to shoot it. And then Claxton got upset at him for shooting the ball. I don't understand why Claxton got upset because Cam Thomas ended up making the three-pointer, which is stupid. I mean, let me know in the comments what you guys think. If you had a wide-open layup, your teammate decided to shoot a three and he made the three, would you be mad at your teammate for making the three? Or would you, like, be happy for your teammate for making the three? Because, like, that really confuses me. Yes, I understand the pass is there. But if you take the three and you hit the three, like, you can't be mad at that. You genuinely cannot be upset because he gave you 3 more points. He gave you 1 extra point than what you were going to give had you had taken the layup. I think it's more selfish than anything else to be mad at somebody for taking a wide open 3 and making the wide open 3. Now, it's if you miss the 3, then it's a different story. Then you can complain. But if you make the 3, you can't complain. If you make the 3, there's no room for complaint there because you scored. The goal of the game is to score. But so there might be a little bit of chemistry issues with this young team, and there might be like not really, I wouldn't say bad blood, but there might be things that being said and things going around that not everybody might agree on, if that makes sense. So, you know, and the way I see it, this young core, the Nets young core is just, you know, they're literally mid-tier. They're not the best, but they're not the worst either. So that's all I have for this 4th segment. So again, let me know in the comments what you guys think and whether or not you guys agree with it, whether you guys disagree with it, whether you guys would have rather seen another team in this area, this, that, and the other. Let me know in the comments. But aside from that, we are going to go ahead and go into the final segment, which is going to be continuing on with this list, going on to, you know, the other teams that have a decent young core. So we stopped at the Nets, which was at number 20. So now we're going to do 21, 22, 23, and we're going to read on the list and continue going on right after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned if you're interested to figure out what teams are on there. And we are back with the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this final segment, I am going to be continuing on with the ranking teams based off of their young core. And I won't end the list today. I'm actually going to end the list tomorrow, where I talk about the worst teams based off of their young core. So I'm going to just save the worst 5 teams for last and go on with the rest of this list and continue with the teams that are like, they aren't really great. They aren't bad, but they aren't good either. So we're in that category. You're not bad, but you're not really good either. And the next team that's going to be on this list is number 21, and that belongs to not Ben Simmons, but the Miami Heat. Now, this is probably going to ruffle a lot of people's feathers because Tyler Hero and Jamie Jacquez Jr. are considered fan favorites, and they're also rather popular in the NBA, like in the media world, as well as on several other fan pages, as well as NBA pages and ESPN pages. Like, you see their names pop up here and there all the time. And Tyler Hero is 24, Jamie Jacquez Jr., he's 23 years old. And that's the big reason why the young core is at number 21, because yes, they are still young, but they are only going to be young for 2 years. And really it's going to be starting okay, now you guys are done being young. When are you guys going to start producing and start putting up some more winning numbers for the team? And other young players for the team are Khalil Ware, Nikola Jovic, Pele Larson, and again, these are just bottom-feeding names. And the fact that they only have 5 young players is also not helping their roster. So, big reason why they're at the ranking right now is because Tyler Hero and Jamie Jacquez Jr., they still have a little bit more to prove. And the number of young players that they have isn't really that great, on top of the fact that the young players that they do have that are actually good aren't going to be young forever, and they're not going to be young for another year or another 2 years. Next team on this list is the Golden State Warriors, and their lineup is very, very, very questionable. They have a lot of guards. They barely have centers. It's perfect for Steve Kerr. If you guys remember from Team USA, Steve Kerr would do nothing but play guards and start guards over centers in certain areas. It was appalling. And Steve Kerr's rotations for the Golden State Warriors, he had Gary Trent playing the 4 for some reason. 6'2" guard playing the 4 makes absolutely zero sense to me, but I digress. And some players from their young core. Podziemski, he's a very good star. He's a very good asset. Kuminga is another very good asset. But aside from those two, the rest are a little bit meh, and they don't really produce all that much for Golden State, and it's not really going to be enough for Golden State unless Steph Curry balls out. So, other than Podziemski and Kuminga's 22, Podziemski's 21. Those two guys are the only good young players on the team. Podziemski, I believe he led the league in charges drawn, which is whoop-de-doo, yay. And Jonathan Kuminga, he ended up really stepping up once Steve Kerr actually allowed him to gain some minutes. Oh, wrong picture. Well, at least now you know who the next team is. But anyways, the Kuminga, he wasn't getting all that many minutes before until he spoke up to the media and was rewarded minutes from Steve Kerr. And Kuminga was great in the time that he played. Same with Podziemski. They've all been great. But again, the way that they played, while they were still on the Warriors, and the way that the Warriors played last season, it's this team it doesn't really seem like this team is going to go anywhere, especially with their young talent. And the next team on the list is the Kings. And, I can't really say the exact same for the Kings. However, I do think that Keegan Murray has already proven himself to be a very vital asset before Podziemski and Kuminga have. But similar to that team, the rest of the other players on the Kings, they're kind of just, they aren't really all that. They do have Devin Carter, Keon Ellis, Kobe Jones, Orlando Robinson. But aside from really Keegan Murray, I think the rotations, for the young players, is a bit of a weak point. But that's my opinion. And again, the Kings, they still could end up being a solid team. And they, a team that goes super, super far into the postseason. They could easily do that. And the Kings, while they might not have a young squad, they do have De'Aaron and Sabonis. They are relatively young. They aren't young enough to be considered part of a young core, but they are young enough to be considered, relatively young. I'm just going to go ahead and pull up Sabonis's age right now just to make sure that I actually have his age right, and I'm not thinking of something completely different. But yeah, Sabonis, he's 28 years old, and I believe De'Aaron Fox is also around that age as well. And yeah, De'Aaron Fox is 26 years old. So De'Aaron is just over the age of the gap in this, just over the age gap in this for this list. So they do still have a young team, and they do still have a very talented team. So just because they don't really have much of a talented young roster doesn't mean that they aren't going to be able to do much with it. And the next team on this list is the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, they do have a lot of young players, but are those young players good? No. The only one that I think is actually very good is Gary Trent Jr. And even then, he's just a spot-up three-point shooter, a spot-up 3-and-D shooter. So saying that he's good is it's child's play, really. It's not really that big of a deal. You know what I'm saying? So, and A.J. Johnson, they recently acquired A.J. Johnson in the draft, Tyler Smith as well. So they do have a lot of unanswered questions, and because of that, I can't really put them that high because some of these players, they haven't really played an NBA game yet, and they also weren't really hyped up that much considering how they were picked relatively later in the NBA draft. And I mean, aside from Gary Trent Jr. for the Bucks, I don't really see many of these younger players making that much of an impact as as Giannis or Dame or any of the other role players that you have on the team. I don't really expect that from them. And finally, the Denver Nuggets. Now, the Denver Nuggets, they have a lot of young talent. They have Peyton Watson, Darren Holmes, Julian Stother, Christian Braun, Zeke Nnaji, and Jalen Pickett, Hunter Tyson. And yes, that's a lot of names. The problem with those names, nobody really knows them. So that's the problem with those names. They have a very solid starting lineup, and they have very solid players coming off the bench. But in terms of their young players, not a lot of them have a lot of hype generated around them. They aren't really famous. They aren't infamous either, so it doesn't mean that they're really bad. But again, they aren't really drawing that much attention to themselves. Especially especially when you consider all these other teams that are drawing attention to themselves, like the Thunder and the Spurs. Those guys being full of young talented teams and just in full rebuild. Pistons as well. Same thing with the Washington Wizards. All of those teams that are just in full rebuild. And it's just, since the Nuggets aren't in a full rebuild, they don't have to worry about having dozens of talented young players on the team, because especially since you have Jokic. But, we're ranking this off of their young core, and the Nuggets are 25th on this list, and it's really, really bad. So that's it. We're going to stop at 25 for today, and like I said before, I'm going to continue on with this list by tomorrow and giving all the worst teams based off of their young core. So it'll be 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So 5th worst team, 4th worst team. That's what I'm thinking of doing in the next segment. So be sure in the next podcast, excuse me. So be sure to tune into that. But aside from that, thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. And as usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you have a hot take, a burning question, we're all ears. And if you really want your comment or question to get noticed, go ahead and use Super Chat or just hit the link displayed below the ticker or the link in the description and send in your comments that way, gsmcpodcast.net. Either or helps the show, you can decide. And that's all that I have for you today on this segment. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn it.